I'm really excited to welcome you all to this event on Inuit self-governance at McGill, which is my alma mater for my undergrad. So it's always nice to be back on my home turf a little bit. And so in terms of the order of events tonight, the first thing we're going to do is have Ripa Evik Carlton come up and have some opening words for us, who's an Inuk elder. So Ripa, if you're in here, you can make your way to the stage. That would be absolutely fabulous. Thank you. Oh, wait.
Wow, it's very bright up here. Koveana uvani katawama ilisinik. I'm happy to be here with you all. My name is Ripa Evik Carlton. I'm originally from Nunatsiavut, Nunavut, but I've been living in Ottawa for the last over 30 years. I was born on the land, which I'm always proud of because it gave me a really good, I think, beginning, and it's something that I'll never forget because it's in me. How my parents raised me. I want to thank all the people that pushed for this series. I think they're very important for our people and for other people, the non-Inuit. So I want to say that too. And I'm also very pleased to be here with the Inuit leaders, the panels. We'll be hearing from them after me. So the title of Ayunakta, to me, it's a really good title because it translates into never give up. As an Inuk woman who was born on the land, it really speaks to me because it really speaks about Inuit strength and resilience. I also wanted to share a little bit just for you to get an understanding how important these values and teachings and traditions of my people are. I was about 6 years old when we were forcefully moved into the settlement of Pengnatang. I call it forcefully moved because that's how it happened. People were forced to relocate. I have wonderful memories of that life, harmony, peace, security, and love is how my early years were. And little did we know that Inuit way of life was going to change drastically. So just to say that in May, we had a really long power outage in Ottawa after the storm. There were times when, because it was 11 days for us, some people were a lot shorter than that, but our area was really hit badly. And so there's times when I'm alone with my husband who's not well. So our kids are working and going to school. So a lot of the time it just felt like, when is this going to be over, you know? But something always spoke, or I don't know if I heard it, but I was reminded how my ancestors survived with very little. Very little, I mean, no, we didn't have stores or health center, or it was the people, the land, the animals, the ocean, and they survived. We're here because of them. I remember the khuluk every day in the winter months. I usually start with the lighting of the khuluk, but just maybe share a little bit about how important these tools are. They were survival implements for my people. A lot of hard work, but they pushed through with no outside people. So that's how strong and how resilient my people are in a harsh environment, traveling by dog team. I remember riding on a kamutik with the dogs pulling us. A very peaceful way to travel, with just the footprints or the steps from the dogs and the sled. You couldn't hear anything else. And I remember falling off the kamutik. I must have been like maybe 4. And I thought nobody's gonna notice that I've fallen off, They're gonna leave me behind because we're in the middle of nowhere. So, but they noticed I had fallen off. I tried to run behind, but I wasn't able to catch up. But they came back to me. So Inuit had a way of system that were not written. Like we lived these principles of Inuit Kauyimayatuqangit. And out of the Inuit Kauyimayatuqangit, I wanted to share something that really spoke to my heart. It's called Nunatsiavut, living a good life. That's the translation. So it means living a good life, and it serves many purposes, but they are all intended to help people live a good life. Living a good life is a very important concept. It involves embracing the teachings from Inuit Kauyimayatuqangit, such as contributing, sharing, caring, belonging, living well, being respectful, and celebrating life. Life was a lot simpler for us than it is today. I remember my mom always wanting to go back to that way of life, and I don't blame her because it was a beautiful existence. You're in harmony with all your surroundings, and we traveled a lot. We just didn't stay in camp. People had favorite areas to go camping in the springtime, in the fall time. So the most times we would be in one location would be from late fall till the spring again. So my mom always talked about going back, and I would not understand because I was too young to really get the understanding of the whole of this time in our lives where it became very different, because there's a lot of other things that happened to us. So I do understand now why she had always talked about going back. Life was simple. There was a lot less stress, even though people had to survive because they're depending on themselves with no outside help whatsoever. But they really did look out for each other. So, values of human existence comes from always striving to live well. Those are the qualities that we look for in our leaders. People look for these when we're leaders. They do guide you in a good place, and so because we're talking about also respecting all living things. As a mother, a grandmother, and a community member, I have a great sense of pride when I look at our young people today. They have a lot more greater opportunities to become their best. And they're our future leaders, so I'm grateful for McGill University who has welcomed Inuit students and will keep welcoming Inuit students. And it's not easy for us Inuit to come from a small community, from very small communities. I come from a community of 1,500 people. That's not many. Most of the students will come from small communities like that. So for them to have a place where they can feel welcome, accepted, and guide them in the city life, because I did go through 2 years, maybe more, of cultural shock. I was completely shocked for the first couple of years. So I'm really grateful that people are wanting to learn more about Inuit, and because maybe I'll stop with this, but there was a hospital built in my community maybe in the 1930s because of the epidemics that were happening to our people. A lot of people died during that time. So a hospital was built in my community, and the Kalunaks, the white people, the nurses, and I don't know how many doctors, they live with the Inuit. My mother's generation lived with them. They learned from each other, right? They had respect for each other. So the relationships were built between them. Many of my people were like, including my mother, was treated because of a disease she developed, TB. I'm grateful for that. We wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that medical intervention. So I think the key for us Inuit, Kalunaks, white people, any other race, is to, because, is to be there side by side, working together, respecting each other, having an understanding of where we all come from. For far too long, I think a lot of us Inuit felt like we were second-class citizens. That's just how it felt when I was growing up. Because of colonization and assimilation, all of these has had a very negative impact on us. So the key is to respect each other and to support the work that we're doing, support our leaders, because it's not easy. Being a leader isn't easy. So however we can support and help each other, that was the way of my people. So I'm also reminding myself that I need to live this way of life. I need to be who I was meant to be. And I need to know who I am. I need to know my identity. The more we know about where we've come from, I'm talking to Inuit here now, or anybody else, our identity, we need to have a sense of pride, and we need to believe in ourselves and to have that confidence. The leaders wouldn't be able to do that if they didn't have these good qualities within them. So with that, I'm going to end here, and thank you for listening.
Oh, that's some water. Oh, Auntie, I think you left your water. So I'm super excited to introduce our speakers tonight. We have with us, is Pita here? Okay, so Pita, I think, got a little sidetracked, so I'm not sure if he's going to be able to join us, but I'm still very excited for who we do have with us on stage. Natan Obed was elected in September 2015 as the president of Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami. and is Vice President, National Affairs for ICC Canada still. Yes? Okay, grand. Natan is from Nunatsiavut, and prior to moving to Ottawa, he lived in Nunavut for 10 years, where he worked for Nunavut Tungagavit Inc. As Director of Social and Cultural Development. And Lisa Koperqualuk has done many, many things. She is now the president of Inuit Circumpolar Council. She is an anthropologist. I've read her wonderful master's thesis, and also has a master's in fine arts. And has been a communications officer for Makivik Corporation for.
All right.
Yeah, these are all true things. These are all true things about her. Anyways, and so also me. I grew up in St. John's, Newfoundland. I'm a second generation urban Inuk, and my grandmother Julia Lucy was from Tushialuk, which is near Makivik, and similar to what our elder was speaking about. My grandmother's community was forcibly resettled just after World War II. So, you know, I think one thing that a lot of people who aren't Inuit maybe don't realize is that, you know, the kind of cultural change that has gone on in our communities has been very rapid, you know, and there are people who, you know, only really got settled into permanent communities, you know, in the last like 50 years or less, right? And so we're going to be talking about some of that and some of the questions that we have for our panel tonight. But anyways, we'll get the show on the road with the chats now. All right, so the first question that we have goes along, good, very good like segue here. So to both of you, what changes have you seen among Inuit during your lifetime that you are most proud of or have given you most hope for the future?
Who should start first?
Go ahead.
I took a few notes, and since Pita is not here, I think we'll have a bit more time. But, you know, I guess I've lived many decades now and hope to live many decades more. And I think one of the things that I've seen grow in our communities, first of all, is secondary schools. When I was little, I had to leave my family to finish my secondary school. So whenever I think of memories, that's where I often go, because those were also the best years of my life too, of learning and enjoying that. And my formative years were traveling back and forth to communities and also learning another culture in Ontario, but also being as close as I could with my family. Only to later realize, many years later, what a big separation that is when you're 13 years old and you have to leave your family to run for your dreams, you know, to finish school. And so I'm very happy for the secondary schools that are present now in Nunavik, especially. I'd be happier to have a college or a university in the north, in the Canadian north. But I know that we're working on it. Yes. Then following that, there's, of course, secondary graduates from Nunavik and Nunavut can now take culturally relevant classes. They can learn Inuktitut at pre-college or at the college level in Ottawa or right here in Montreal. They can take art and culture classes. They can take circumpolar literature. I noticed that one of the teachers of Nunavik Nunatsiavut is here and teaches English as well. But when they learn English, it's about Inuit, it's about circumpolar people. It has to do with circumpolar literature. So I think that's wonderful. Although at the same time, I often tell myself, you know, here I am at university studies, and I'm studying my own people, and I'm part of the people who's overstudying my own people. So why can't I study some other culture, you know? Sometimes I get that thought in my mind. So that makes me think of the film that Jebdi Nungnak made called Khallunat 101. It's a funny film. If some of you haven't seen it, you should. It's the Inuit take on Khallunat studies, which is white people, the study of white people by Inuit. And it's really a comical view on that. It's giving that
kind of reversing the gaze.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I when I did my master's, it was with a Cameroonian anthropologist,
Yes.
and I moved to South Africa to study with him. And one of the reasons why I chose to study with him was I read a paper where he talked about being a Black anthropologist, and he was like,
Yes.
people just walk up to me at conferences and they're like, "You're an anthropologist? That's so interesting." And he says like, you know, and then I would look at them who were mostly, you know, older white people, and I would look at them and say, "You're an anthropologist. That's so interesting," you know?
Yes. Yeah.
The way we get boxed in.
That's
by
right. Yeah.
expectations,
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's, you know, a lot of films are coming out now made by Inuit. So that's another interesting phenomenon these days. There's a lot more Inuit taking interest in producing materials for you know, for fun, but also for showing the outside world what Inuit filmmaking really is. And I think that really came when Atanakjuat, that movie by Zacharias Kunuk, came out. So I find that interesting. I mean, that's a tangent I'm getting into. I'm also like, I'm really, back when I was 13 years old, I'd have to collect my family only on Sundays, because that was the cheapest times that I could call home. And to speak with my family. But now we've got Facebook, and I can just connect with my families and see the new babies being born, and look at my nieces and nephews and how they're doing, or what terrible things they're up to as well. So there's that closer connection at the same time, you know. I get to see a lot of wonderful Inuit products that are being made by Inuit women, like sealskin boots. I think there's more and more Inuit women interested in making sealskin boots, whereas while I was growing up, we were kind of interested in going away to school, you know. So it's really, really nice to see that. Also, like, people interested in naming their children with Inuit names more, rather than Mary, Annie,
Maria.
yeah, a lot of the Christian names. And one of the things that I'm also quite proud of, and I think that's really contributing to Inuit communities, is the, and I'm not promoting them, I don't work for them or anything, but I have worked for them before. It's the Federation of the Cooperatives of Northern Quebec, and also the Federation in Nunavut, which has grown incredibly. Oh, there's Pita. There is Pita.
Yay.
With that, I'm going to have to shorten my intervention. But I think as a reaction to the Hudson Bay Company that had established itself in the Arctic, the Inuit began the co-op stores as a very small movement. But 50 years later, almost 50 years later, they have grown so much that they have a really, really good chunk of the economy in Nunavik, and I think they have a lot of good potential to continue growing and not just running co-ops, because you know, a cooperative helps, you know, economic growth in the communities, but also develops, you know, what things Inuit can do in their communities. We see all kinds of cooperatives over here in Quebec, so I'm just sort of I'm not trying to promote them or anything, because Makivik does a lot of very good economic development as well, and construction and so on. But I think there's a lot of potential for more growth. But and I've been happy to see that, because the backbone of our self-determination is based on having a good, strong economy. I'll end with that. Hi, Pita.
Hey, Lisa.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. I went to the wrong address. I went to Lachine. I just put in Sherbrooke Street.
Oh,
And
no.
it took me to Lachine. And I had to come back all the way, so I apologize.
Other
I'm
side of Sherbrooke, yeah.
very, very, very sorry, but I'm here now, so I need
Yes.
better governance on my side.
Yeah, and also on co-ops, very exciting, the first Indigenous person to be on the national board of the Federation of Co-ops is an Inuk woman from Nunavut, so, yeah. We lead in co-ops.
Yeah, good.
Yes. All right. And so, Pita, just to catch you up, so we're just still on the first question I had, which is the one about changes you've seen during your lifetime that are hopeful. You don't have to answer now, just letting you know.
All right.
Natan can go next.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to say a few words. So I'll just say a few words in my language, confuse you a bit first, and I'll make it better for you. Nakumik sivuli pamitamani hataw na matakununga ilani mito kahonga kiwai gama 5:15 inakasakaw yung 1 hour ngotana inakamatamong kagasunga ilani mito kaho tigiya. Yeah, I'm just saying in my language that I left my office around 5:15, and I'm finally here. So, anyways, what are we looking for? What changes have we seen? It seems like a short period of time that we started working with the non-native society, especially with the traders, the whalers, and so forth. But it's only recently that we started living in community. So I've seen tremendous changes in my short lifetime of what we've gone through. And we're better educated now. We learned a lot. It's something that was introduced to us, especially governance. We had our own governance system, and we still have a long ways to go to adapt to something that was introduced to us. We had our own system, but we have better health services now. Our life expectancy is much longer than before. We had a hard life, but we were independent. We didn't have anybody dictating to us. Someone that has come across the pond, as they say, and started basically dictating to the native people, Inuit, the Indians, and so forth, that you're going to abide by our laws, by our rules, never taking into consideration our own aspirations, our own goals that we had. But that's past. Now, how do we move forward? How do we govern ourselves now? We're still adapting to a system that was introduced to us. We've created a lot of businesses over the years, as Lisa alluded to. We've created 2 airline companies. Air Inuit, which is a 100% owned Inuit company, where we employ just over 200 beneficiaries, meaning people that are beneficiaries of our corporation. We have so many pilots now. So we've been very successful on the airline side because of where we are. Airline is our lifeline to the outside world. I had to fly in from my community to be here. There's no roads leading into our community. So it's a very different world from what we see here in the South, that we're very much dependent on the airplane. So one of the first things that Makivik did was buy an airline company or start an airline company because they knew that we're not going to get any roads leading into our community. So that's my opening statements at this time. So I'll follow further with further comments. So thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah, and good evening, everyone. As I've been introduced, I'm Natan, and I've now been in the role of Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami president for 7 years. I also know it was 7 years because there was a Facebook memory that was shared on my page of the moment that the news was told, and that was yesterday. So it's 7 years as of yesterday. Facebook doesn't let you forget many things, even if you might want to, but that was a celebration, and it was a wonderful opportunity that I continue to feel very honored to be in this particular role. And immediately when I think about what has changed, well, first and foremost, we have an Inuk who is Governor General. I mean, it's... Yeah, Mary Simon has been a leader in her community, in the region, in national politics, in international politics, and now is head of state for Canada. And that really is a moment in time where we can reflect on just how far we've come. It wasn't very long ago that being an Inuk wasn't necessarily something that you wanted to share with the rest of the world, let alone your community. There was so much racism towards Inuit, and also then so much systemic racism, especially in relation to the limitations of what Inuit could do, because of the stereotypes and because of the attitudes that many Canadians had towards us. And to have been a subject of racism and those stereotypes as a young person, and to see now a transformational change for many Inuit and many Inuit youth who go through the world telling everybody who will listen that they're Inuk and that they're from Nunavik or Nunatsiavut or Nunavut or the Inuvialuit region. And this is where they come from in the world. And these are the people who are a part of our community, whether it's Elisabeth Isaac or, if it's Tanya Tagak or Zacharias Kunuk. All of these people are now household names, and most Canadians, if you talk about these people, know and celebrate these people who have done this work as Inuit every single time they can, reminding all of their audiences or all of the country who they are and where they come from. And that's an incredible difference from where we were in, say, from when I was a young person in the early 1980s. Being, called a dirty Eskimo by many different people within the community that I grew up in. It's just incredible to think of how far we've come. There is a weight to that as well, because it isn't just a celebration of culture. It also is, what are we going to do with the opportunities that we have now, moving towards self-determination. So the settling of our comprehensive land claim agreements, the implementation of those agreements, and also the ongoing relationship we have with the Crown in Right of Canada at the federal level and with provinces and territories, that's also a place where there has been a fundamental shift. The Prime Minister will say Inuit Nunangat just off the top of his head in conversation. And when he says that, he has a clear understanding of what that term means. It means the sum total of the comprehensive land claim settlement areas, which account for 40% of Canada's landmass and over 72% of its coastline. That the Prime Minister and the ministers of the Crown have that understanding is also a very new thing. So I see a sense of optimism and hope within our Inuit communities about what is possible now for self-determination and also for the relationship with the country.
Makivik, thank you for your comments. The next question that I prepared was that each of you have participated in politics to varying degrees. I also ran in a very chaotic election myself. That is not in the question, that's just context. And so humbleness is a value that I deeply associate with my Inuit culture. In political campaigns, how can Inuit interested in politics explain why they would be good in the role they want to be elected to while remaining humble?
I don't know who you're asking. I mean, I know you're asking us, but who is going to start? I mean, you have to be humble with the role that you have as an elected person. Once you start once you are representing people, that you have to always take into account that you're representing the Inuit. I didn't run for myself, I ran for the people of what Natan spoke about the injustices, about racism and so forth. This is something that I wanted to fight, to make sure people understood that we were a governing people and that we will always go in that direction, that I want to get away from being dictated to, but being an equal. So it's hard. It's very hard to answer a question about staying humble, because you have to stay humble, because you can't start gloating, I did this, I did all this kind of thing. That it's always a team effort, that it's not one person that's running our corporations, that I make it very clear that I'm just one of the people. I might be the president, but I'm still only one of the people that makes it as a success what it is today. So for me to try to answer something like this by staying humble, it's hard, but at the same time, I also have to acknowledge the successes that we've had. I mentioned our airline. We also have shipping company. These are something that Inuit should gloat about, kind of a message, even though we can still be humble, but at the same time, we have to tell our successes that we've had. The question that you have had, what are you most proud of? Like having taken control of our own companies, this is something that I'm very proud of. The shipping companies, the airline companies. So these kind of things that shows that we've come a long way. We employ roughly 4,000 Canadians at this time with our corporation, in the airline sector, in the shipping business, in the construction field, and so forth. So a hard one to answer, Patricia.
Yes.
It's Patricia, I presume.
Yeah, it is,
Okay.
yeah. I don't ask easy questions. I try not to.
Well, immediately I think back of my time as a senior manager or somebody who oversaw job applications within Inuit organizations in Nunatsiavut, in Ottawa at ITK, and also in Nunavut. And so many Inuit are so uncomfortable talking about themselves in any capacity, even if they have an amazing resume and have done incredible work. If you have an interview that in a Southern context, in a general Canadian context, a person is supposed to talk about themselves, all the things that they have done, perhaps even take little liberties about the role that they played within a particular initiative here and there. I found it almost the exact opposite with many Inuit who have grown up and have learned from their community to not be boastful and not to talk about themselves and their own achievement. And so it's hard to get the cues sometimes of when Inuit are talking about achievement and accomplishment, but not doing it in a way that is completely boastful and saying, I did this, I did that, I'm so amazing. You'll hardly ever find anyone talking like that. But you can talk about the third person. You can talk about being a part of an institution or organization, being a part of a community. You can also defer that respect to elders or to people with knowledge in communities. And so sometimes being deferential is a way of maintaining humbleness, talking through people with knowledge, invoking knowledge that you learned from people who are the undisputed leaders within your community in a particular place. These are all ways in which I think Inuit show respect and also show that we have knowledge as well. And then I think in this day and age, and I've come to terms with this, that I'm very proud of some of the accomplishments that I've done. And being a graduate from Tufts University and having worked on some incredibly difficult files over time, I'm happy to share those experiences, and I'm at peace with telling you that I've done them, even though part of me wants to just not bring attention to the things that I might have done because I'm worried that you might then have an opinion of me that is not what I want it to be. So I think we struggle with it about how to articulate success. And when it comes to elections, I think there's also not a homogeneous Inuit population. And sometimes elections are really nasty, even in Inuit elections. I'm looking at both of you for head nods. And so sometimes you do have to go into very uncomfortable spaces and sometimes fight for yourself and for your lived experience to ultimately do the job that you want to do on behalf of Inuit.
Before you talk, Lisa, I just also want to kind of make a comment about, like, there's been a couple allusions to, like, the cultural difference between kind of like our homelands, the North and the South. And, you know, it really is a culture shock for a lot of people who come down. And, like, there are some very, very different ways that Inuit, like, in our culture signal things like respect, for example. And, yeah, Natan's comments about, like, some of those things reminded me of a story my dad told. So my dad used to teach at community college in Newfoundland. And a friend of his was like, oh, Donnie, like, we interviewed an Inuit guy, because he was like, this guy knew my dad was Inuit, so he was like, my dad was like, oh, cool. Did you give him the job? Which is the main question, right? Like, and then the guy was like, oh, well, you know, he wasn't looking us in the eyes when he gave the job interview, and so we weren't sure he could control the classroom, so we didn't give him the job. But in Inuit culture, like, not looking someone directly in the eyes can be seen as like a form of like really high respect, because like you're not kind of like totally challenging them, you know? And so my dad was like, this guy could probably code shift and would know that his students are a different, you know, group of people than like someone who's like in charge of giving you a job, right? So this person was trying to be deferential and trying to say, like, I respect you. I'm not going to like stare directly into your eyes and like the depths of your soul. And then, you know, that actually backfired on him, right? And so, like, when you are interacting with people who are from different cultures, even if we're both from Canada, you know, like, just being very mindful that the way we signal things might be different. But
Yeah, so true. The question is very difficult, and I would leave the answers to Pita and Natan both, because it's not easy to answer. It's also loaded, it's complex, and perhaps I can bring in, as an Inuk woman, perspective. So, because, but also in an anthropological perspective, let's say, we have gone through so many, you know, historical events and forces that we had no control over, where, you know, events happened, assimilation policies, paternalistic views, racism, etc., where we lost control of our destiny a lot. And new structures also were created where, for example, decades ago, community councils were created in the communities, and they were, these community councils were formed not by Inuit themselves, and in ways that they didn't have control, and they were mostly composed of men, members of council. So Inuit women had no place in those days in I think all Inuit communities. And so it took so many decades for Inuit women to start asserting themselves and into, and integrating themselves into political life. And that took many, many years, while at the same time respecting the dignity of their men. And Inuit women have that special role in the communities because they are leaders in their communities. They are the people also mainly taking care, mainly the caretakers in the communities, the daycare systems, education, the health system, and so on, is mostly women. And I think they are doing this in a very respectful way towards Inuit men. While so many of the colonial practices have tried crushing the Inuit men's spirit, at the same time, Inuit women are trying to keep uplifting Inuit men, their men, and also leading in their communities. So being humble is, I wonder what that has to do with Inuit culture. I mean, the sense of duty is very strong, or was very strong in the past. We have to defer to those who are in positions of authority. Our parents, our angayokak, are in positions of authority. Even as we grew older, if my parents would still be alive, I would still have to respect what they would want me to do. I was adopted by my grandparents, and my mother, she had no choice but to accept that. Even if she may not have agreed, it was also the best decision. So I think that sense of duty is what we call in Inuktitut ilira. And ilira is a very important concept in the way we grow up to respect authority, to have deference to authority. But it also was a weakness in the past when those people entering as authority, the new dominant culture that came in, took advantage of that. So I think we do have to be careful when we talk about being humble, and because we have to, as Pita said, it's not easy. It's not easy to deal with those tensions that we have to live with in our society. Yeah, we have all kinds of different levels of tensions that we're dealing with. Even among Inuit ourselves, and then with that dominant culture, which is always trying to be so superior to us in terms of education, in terms of our laws, in terms of anyway, more to say on that.
If I could just add to that,
Yes.
women had the biggest role in the Inuit world. Without women, we wouldn't have survived. They did all the sewing, they did everything for us. It's not just Inuit, I'm not going to say that Inuit look down on women. We never have. I never have, and I never will. I've always treated them as my equals, and they will always be our equals, and they were our equals. Each woman had a role in our society, and the men had their own roles. And I've always stated that without the women, we wouldn't have survived in the environment that we were living in. So they were very important. And we see all kinds of cultures that have said, no women allowed, no women allowed. It's only recently, even in Canada, that women were able to start voting, to be in politics. So it's not just Inuit that have gone through this. And I just want to touch upon a bit about elections in Nunavik. When we talk about, we're very humbled ourselves when we get elected, because I have 14 communities that I represent, and I have to campaign in every one of those communities. Since we're not many in numbers, everyone knows who we are. So we always have to be humble and say, this is the files that I'd like to work with you to try to realize with you. So it's a very different world. We have no campaign manager, so if I'm running an election, I'm doing my own managing of what I'd like to try to help out the people with. It's not me, it's we, that I give the message out to the people that they're the ones that are going to vote for you if you say the right things, and you have to follow through. So it's very different world. There is some bashing here and there behind the scenes, but not so much publicly like we see in the South when somebody's running against someone. They're more focused on their own campaign. They're not so focused on another person's campaign. But if it gets dirty, that's where they draw the line and say, here's the answers.
Thank you. So our next question is, as has also been kind of alluded to, so Inuit are the only group in Canada who all have settled land claims, which makes us pretty unique, and it is a recent event for us in our political history. So the process of creating these institutions, many of them are modeled, at least in part, on Western structures. So things like a land claim organization is often set up either as a regional government, an ethnic government, a corporation of some kind, school boards, health boards, these kinds of things. So to what extent have those institutions been able to embody Inuit values, and has structuring our institutions after Western structures caused clashes, kind of like, I mean that in a cultural sense, within the institutions? Again, only easy questions here tonight.
Well, that when you think about bringing Inuit values to our institutions, it's very hard to bring Inuit values into an institution that's been forced on you, kind of a thing. So we've had to try to adapt to something. The only thing that I can say that we're bringing value is our language, our culture, our history, and using what we can to run our corporations, because in the schools, it's only taught to a certain grade. After that, there's no more Inuit classes, so you're not really bringing any Inuit value. The only thing that I'm bringing into these corporations is a sharing. We're a sharing society. Whatever animals you might have caught would have been shared among the people. So this is something that's changing. It's become a money society, that more and more people are reliant on money, unlike in the past where our values, our sharing values were really practiced. Now, when someone catches any animals these days, because we are living in today's world where we have snow machines, where you have canoe boats to go out hunting, and it costs quite a lot of money to buy these goods to be able to go out in the land. Unlike in the past where you only had dog teams and your harpoons and so forth, which was gotten off the land. Now we have to live with what where we are today in this society, that even though that I said that it was a foreign, very foreign for us to adapt to some other culture, which we were forced, in a lot of cases where we were forced to sign these agreements, because I've always said that it was very one-sided. A foreign government came into the region, started dictating, here's how you're going to live, here's how you're going to dictate yourself, here are the laws, here are the rules, never taking into consideration the people themselves. How did you govern yourselves? How did you do it in the past? Someone that comes from someone that came a few hundred years ago basically took over the lives of indigenous people, where we had to adapt to their culture, to their values. Now we're trying to bring that back with the self-determination process that we're undertaking at this time, and hopefully that we'll be able to govern ourselves once again in the future like we were governing ourselves without someone dictating. And the ironic thing is that the Inuit helped out the explorers, the whalers. In a lot of cases, these whalers, these traders, explorers wouldn't have survived without the help of the Inuit. It's very hard for the Western society to acknowledge this. Some have acknowledged that without the Inuit, we wouldn't have survived. Without the Indians, we wouldn't have survived. They came in and took over, and never acknowledging that we are a people, that this is our home. I've always said right up to now, even though the agreements have been signed, have been that they were forced to surrender their lands, surrender their rivers, even though an individual can't own a piece of land by himself or herself, that we have to abide by the laws that were introduced to us, that they never asked us, what do you think? How should we do it? Kind of a message they should be asking, and asking the Inuit, we want to use this river, are you okay with it? The land that we live in presently in Nunavik was given away by the monarchy. So in a lot of cases, I've respected the Queen, but the monarchy, when the king decided to give King Rupert's land away without us being involved, then in turn the government of Canada in 1912 giving the land to Quebec, and there was a reluctance on Quebec's side to take over the lands of the Inuit because there was expenses. It's only recently when they started finding minerals, the riches of the land, that they came in. If there wouldn't have been any riches, Canada worked hard to try to convince Quebec, you have to take care of these citizens if they're in your land. But at the same time, I've never agreed to these agreements that were signed by the Inuit along with the two governments, Government of Canada and the Government of Quebec, because it was one-sided. It shouldn't have been one-sided. It should have been on an equal basis. You live off this land. What are you looking for? I mean, in Canada, it's a given that you're given education, health. We would have gotten these anyways, even if we didn't sign these agreements. So you'll be hearing me in the years to come that me talking about the injustices that have been done in the past that have to be right to still. So the Government of Canada is much more open these days with the ideas that the Inuit have, and that what happened in the past was very wrong. I don't know if a lot of you know about our history of what we went through in the different decades, where we had our dogs slaughtered, where we were relocated, where we were sent to residential school. These all had an effect on the people. So I've respected the non-natives, but I also want them to respect us for who we are. I've always looked for equality, and that's what we're going to keep fighting for, is equality, even though it might be a tough battle, but we're going to keep fighting.
You want? Yeah, that's, wow. We have so many institutions now. Are they running based on Inuit values? I think they're making a lot of effort to do that. And that's where, because they've been running for decades, we actually have to take a step back and say, whoa, wait a minute. What are our Inuit values? If I run this this organization based on Inuit values, and the way it's running now, based on Western values, how is it going to change into a real Inuit project, into a real Inuit run, like real? Because we do have organizations that are run by Inuit. They do have Inuit board of directors, but they were born, they are creatures of public government. They are creatures of the Canadian political system. And they have to run according to Canadian laws or Quebec laws or even Nunavut. For me, I've had to, if we really want to run our society based on our inherent right to self-determination, that inherent right to self-determination is, it's Inuit. So what does Inuit education mean? It's being Inuk today means living alongside a Canadian society. And so we need to be educated within two different systems or an integrated system at the same time where we don't want to lose our language. And this is happening right now. So a lot of our language is really in a precarious situation. We could lose it within a generation, maybe two, if we really don't do something about it. If Inuit education is based on Inuit values, we need Inuit teachers who are really capable of teaching our children Inuktitut and all the way through to college. And we don't have that. There's a lot of good work. Makivik was teaching Inuktitut up to grade 3, I believe. And the bilingualism project is a bit complicated. So now we're seeing the curriculum of Inuktitut going a little bit further instead of starting right from the beginning. They'll have Inuktitut, I think, only in the first year, if I remember, Pita? Yeah. And then they start second language much earlier, is what I want to say. So there's real challenges in education. Then, of course, there's law. There's, I promote Inuit law in the work I've done. And one of the things I've realized is even we Inuit don't know a lot about our own law. We never wrote it down. So there's a lot of work that has to be done in having this dialogue about what Inuit law is for us. If we want to run our own government, we want to create our own laws based on our values, on our culture, based on our kinship system, which I often say is the basis of our law. Inuit kinship helps us to become who we are as contributing members of our society. And so we want to make changes if we want to run our own governments that are really based on Inuit values. We want to know what our laws are. What is the fundamental basis of our laws? And very often that's also related to our own belief system, which comes from far away, which is not based on the Christian belief system. So there's a link going far, far back to those fundamental values, those beliefs that we created as we came to Inuit Nunangat. and formed that knowledge system, which is Inuit. So that knowledge system, it's Inuit law, how we educate our children, how we take care of childbirth and the sick and the elders. There is so much about Inuit values that when we really take a close look at it, we have the ability to define and talk about it with our youth and learn about it through Nunatsiavut and more and further. And I think that's coming. Yes.
I appreciate the perspectives given by both Pita and Lisa from a lifetime of leadership. And I often think of the role that I play and the influence that I might have in relation to getting the most out of the tools that I have at my disposal. And in the last 50 years or so, ever since the Calder case, Canada has been on a new trajectory when it comes to the recognition of Indigenous peoples' rights, modern treaties, comprehensive land claim agreements, and then also the relationship between Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Inuit and Métis, and the Crown. You look at Section 35 of the Constitution, you look at Supreme Court cases, all of which are tools to us in the work that we do to create self-determination for Inuit. So I also think about the way Inuit lived prior to contact, and the governance that Inuit had was not synonymous with the type of geopolitical governance that Inuit find ourselves in today. There were small familial groups or groups of associated families who chose to live under a certain set of principles and rules and work together for the best of that particular community. That wasn't thousands and thousands and thousands of people over, a third of Canada's landmass. That was specific to a particular place and time, and we're in a very different time now. So the best that we can do is use the tools that we have at our disposal and apply them in a globally informed, an evidence-based, and an Inuit-specific way. And we do that with the types of governance models that we create, but we also do that with the types of positions that we create and work that we do on policy areas within our organizations. It is always a work in progress. Our governance and the way in which we create self-determination mechanisms in the 21st century is not going to look exactly like it would have looked in the 1950s. And certainly I would hope that leaders will come after us and build better structures that will allow for prosperity and unity in a way that we can't even imagine. So the perspective is that I bring to the table is that all governance models are flawed. All governance models can be improved. And we have done the best that we can within the constructs that we find ourselves in. And yes, it does mean that there are Western structural challenges to an Inuit democracy, but I also have the faith in our perspective and our leadership to be able to work those as best we can.
I'd like to add further. Do we have a lot of time?
We don't have a lot of time left, but you can add your little thing, and then I'll remind us how little
All
time we
right.
have, and then we'll keep going.
Yeah,
mhm.
I realized that I didn't answer the question. The Western structural cause culture clashes within these institutions. I think, of course, there are cultural clashes that occur. So we can just look at, the general stereotypes that are formed about Inuit and how Inuit should work from 9 to 5, and a lot of Inuit don't know how to work from 9 to 5, or they don't want to work, and that's and I recall too now that I think you were making a presentation about work ethics, work environment, how that can how it can be adapted to Inuit values as well, because Inuit, of course, are still providing for their families through hunting and Inuit activities out on the land. So there are changes that could be made within the workplace even, because most Inuit I know are hardworking Inuit. And the 9 to 5 type of work from Monday to Friday, I think it's very restrictive for an Inuit lifestyle, and could become more flexible. The other is the issue, but I think I won't get into it now because we don't have a lot of time. But I wanted to talk a little bit about lateral violence that occurs in the communities, but I think that'll be for another time.
Yeah, another can of worms to open
Yes.
another time. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So we are running a little short on time, so I'll ask you to keep your answers a bit short to the last two questions. So as a public figure and leader for Inuit, how do you make sure you are being accountable to Inuit? What does accountability mean from an Inuit perspective, and what does it look like to you?
I'm waiting.
Maybe I haven't answered first yet, so I'll
Good
go
idea.
first. First and foremost, I'm accountable to my board of directors, and I'm sitting next to two people who are on my board of directors. So that's the right answer. Our governance model at the national level, I think, is very strong, and each of our members have been elected to serve their regions, and they come to the national table and provide direction to the ITK president. And then my mandate is solely from the resolutions that the board of directors pass. So I have a very clear governance structure that gives me my mandate and to work with the organization to ensure that it's implemented, but also then the accountability, not only to the board, but to all Inuit across Canada. I also think of accountability in a moral sense and an ethical sense. And so I understand that as I undertake my responsibilities, that it is also my duty to ensure that I do that to the best of my possible abilities when it comes to morally what is right, ethically what is right, and also the respect for the humanity of all Inuit across this country. I've learned so much, so many stories that have been brought to me, so many particular examples where I would have had no understanding before. And so the empathy that I have and the understanding that I have through listening to Inuit give their perspectives or stories then also becomes a part of my accountability mechanism. There's something that many Inuit ascribe to, which is that you don't talk about things that you are not familiar with or that you have not lived. And that is something that elders in my community talked a lot about when it came to who represented them and why somebody so young, as I was when I first ran for office, might not be the right person to represent them. And I've struggled with that particular concept because I can have experiences myself, but in the role that I play, I do need to try to bring as many perspectives as I can into the conversation. So I try to be as honorable as I can to the perspectives that have been shared with me in the way that then we form our positions at the national level, and that the way that I then speak about Inuit and speak about things that I may not have lived myself.
Wangali. That's not an easy question to answer, and as ICC Canada President, I'm also accountable to members of the ICC Canada Board, and I think one of the things that I think of when being accountable is also making sure that Inuit, the people that ICC Canada is representing, know the work that we are doing for them. But it's also, it goes the other way too. It's to ensure that we are doing the work that they want us to do, that Inuit want us to do, that they are saying is important for them. And so it's a matter of listening as well. So I think for ICC Canada, it's going to become more and more important. ICC itself has existed for over 40 years now. And sometimes the connections have to be built with the communities because it's international work. It's outside of the communities that the work is often getting done, and sometimes the communities don't see that it's for long-term benefits, for protecting the Arctic environment, for protecting the marine ecosystem, where often it's the international forum where decisions are being made and where we're saying this is where we really need to be. And so it's a very important two-way communication.
push and pull.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, just to add to it, living in Nunavik, I'm elected from Nunavik, so I'm living in Nunavik, so they see me, they have access to me. I'm always visiting their communities, our communities every 2 years as an example, to hear them out. What are the issues that we should be fighting for? Here are the issues that we're fighting for at this time, but what other issues are there? Being accessible to the people. I'm on Facebook. I might be a leader, but I'm also on Facebook. Unfortunately, it's no choice kind of a thing. So people have access to me basically 24 hours a day, that if they want to find me, they're going to find me. We're not many in number, unlike other leaders where you have practically no access to unless you go through the proper channels, as they say, that we're very accessible, unlike other leaders that you would never be able to send an email to, a message through Facebook, a phone call. I get phone calls at home. So we're very accessible. So I'm very accountable to the people, that I don't do things without consulting them. If we need a referendum to deal with any issues that might have effects on our lives, that they need to have a role. It's not just elected people that are going to make these decisions, unlike governments that might decide to come up with a law, and the law is the law. And for us, we don't do anything without being accountable to them. It's them that will help us decide where we should go as leaders. So we're very accessible all the time, and being accountable to the people by going on the radio. I go on the radio every 2 weeks because we have a regional radio where every community can hear me talking about the issues that we have. That I've made that commitment that I want to be accountable to them, that they're the ones that elected me, so I will be talking to them. We will not decide anything that's going to have a major effect on our lives. So being accountable to your constituents, they're the ones that voted you, so make sure that you stay in contact with them, talk to them, hear them out, kind of a thing.
And so the last question I have for our panelists is, when you close your eyes and you dream about the future of Inuit Nunangat, about a time when everyone has a safe, warm place to sleep and enough food to eat, when everyone's basic needs are met, what are your dreams? In other words, when you dream beyond Inuit having our basic human rights respected, what are your dreams? And one of the reasons why I want to ask this question is that in our communities, many people do fight for their very, very basic human rights to be respected, things like having access to food, not having to sleep in an overcrowded house, and these kinds of things. And so when we're fighting for basic things, it's sometimes easy to lose sight of the fact that we also have to dream, and we also have to think beyond the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And so I'm really excited to hear the answer to this one and end on a positive note.
I guess the first thing that my dream is to have control of our own destiny without having someone control my destiny. That's the way it is now, that my destiny is controlled by someone at this time. So having full control of where we go as a people, that's a dream that I've had ever since I was elected, and that we will aspire to get there. Like anybody in this world, we want to see doctors, Inuit becoming doctors, professors, and so forth. It's slow in coming, but I also want to acknowledge that we have lawyers now. And I can also say that my daughter became a lawyer through McGill, so that's a step in the direction of having control, is having people educated, having lawyers, doctors, and so forth that we see every day in the world. We still don't have that. We're still very much a hunter-gatherer mentality that a 9-to-5 thing was very foreign to us, and that as soon as we see geese coming or start seeing animals, we have to go after, because country food is still much better than store-bought foods. It's much healthier. So a lot of people still rely on country food. My dream is to keep eating country for years to come, for people to eat healthy, and that it's better for them for themselves. Our dream, like any other society, is to have control, and that's something we don't have at this time. So that's my dream, that we will fight together with Natan, Lisa, and the other region, because when Natan talked about 40% of the land mass is covered in the Inuit territory, but in the circumpolar world, it's much bigger. So where ICC comes in, and because we have the Greenlanders, we have the Alaskans, we have the Russians, and the Canadian Inuit. We're 4 different Inuit groups, but basically living the same way, which we've done for thousands of years. And I have cousins in Nunavut. I probably have cousins in Alaska and Greenland. And if we go to start looking, I would easily find these cousins. So our dream is to take control of our own destiny. It's a simple answer, and that's what we're looking for. Because once you have control of your own destiny, you have successful businesses, there'll be food on the table, kind of a message.
At ITK, during the first year of my presidency in 2016, we thought very hard about our mission statement, the words that we would use to describe how we our objective organization. And we came up with Canadian Inuit are thriving through unity and self-determination. And that is a very complicated thing to achieve, and one that you can always do better. So it is something that still motivates me. But when I think of what I hope for, I can't help but think of some of the real challenges that we face and overcoming them, especially for Inuit children. in relation to mental health and in relation to suicide prevention. I've been fortunate enough to work on these files for a long time, and to replace risk factors that Inuit children experience in life with protective factors during childhood, that to me would be the thing that I would dream of the most.
So in a world where all our human rights and Indigenous rights are respected, right? I dream that we are sitting on our own land. It's our land. There are no boundaries separating Inuit of Greenland, Inuit of Canada, Inuit of Alaska, Inuit of Chukotka in Russia. And we're all traveling, once again, all across Inuit Nunat freely, where we want to go, as we did in the past. So then we are just, and slowly it's happening, and I see that is in our future. Canada and Greenland are working out an agreement in order for Inuit of the two countries to be able to travel with free mobility, without having to do so much paperwork. So that it may not happen in the next few years, but I imagine that is going to happen one day. Yes.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight out here in the audience. Thank you to our panelists. I think Anika is hiding out there with some gifts, perhaps, somewhere. Yes, okay, well. Thank you so much for McGill for having us for this wonderful conversation. I mean, I graduated from McGill in 2015, and I can say that no event like this ever happened during my time at McGill. So it's really great to see the university turning a new leaf and working to build stronger relationships with all Indigenous people. So, Nakumiswak, thank you very much.